Good afternoon, Senators. Prior to the suspension, we were debating a resolution resolved that a humble address be presented to Her Excellency the Governor General, thanking her for her most gracious speech at the opening of Parliament. And prior to the lunch break, Senator the Honorable Dr. Trevor Johnson had taken the floor. I presume that we are now ready to proceed. Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Dr. Trevor Johnson. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, before I begin, I would like to join my colleagues in extending condolences to the 4 young women who lost their lives over the weekend, also to the young man in Abaco who lost his life, and the young woman in Grand Bahama. The young man in Abaco and I actually went to high school together, and I know him relatively well. My thoughts and prayers are with the families of those young people at that time. And I think, as said earlier by Senator Komalafe, those moments remind us of exactly how fragile life is, especially as a relatively young man. On another note, I wish also to join in congratulating the United States on 250 years of its independence. And also, if I don't speak again in this place before our independence, I wish our country a happy 53rd independence, which we will celebrate next week. Madam President, we stand today to thank Her Excellency, the Governor General, Dame Cynthia Pratt, for her gracious delivery of the speech from the throne. I wish to express not only my appreciation for the constitutional duty she has so faithfully performed, but also note my respect for a woman whose life of service has inspired countless Bahamians. My respect for Her Excellency did not begin with her appointment as Governor General. It began more than 2 decades ago. Around 2005, when I was about 10 years old, I attended a church service at the New Mount Olivet Baptist Church in Holmes's Rock. Her Excellency was the guest speaker. I can still remember listening to her speak with conviction and an unwavering faith in God. Madam President, Her Excellency's contribution to our nation spans decades of public service. She has broken barriers and inspired generations of women and girls to believe that no office in this country is beyond their reach. Her legacy is one that deserves to be remembered and celebrated in this nation. Madam President, as is our constitutional tradition, the speech from the throne reflects the government's legislative and programmatic priorities. It is therefore that agenda that falls to this chamber for scrutiny. While the speech is ambitious in its scope, it is, in my respectful view, deficient in various areas that require my attention in this Honorable Senate. Madam President, I confess that by the end of the speech from the throne, I was asking myself whether I was listening to an intentional program for the government or reading a wish list. Madam President, there's no shortage of ambition in this speech. It promises new legislation, new authorities, new framework, new policies, and reforms touching almost every sector of our nation. Madam President, the only thing that was not promised was to wipe away every tear. I mean, we know we've heard that before. Ambition is welcome. Vision is necessary. But Madam President, vision alone is not governance. Madam President, it is against this backdrop that I turn to my first area of concern: the apparent lack of intentional planning and disciplined project management underpinning the government's agenda. Madam President, effective public administration requires more than announcing what a government intends to do. It requires clear targets, firm deadlines, and results that can be measured and not simply promises that can be repeated. In other words, Madam President, when will the national investment policy be completed? By what date will the national digital ID become operational? When will the residential tenancy authority begin hearing disputes? Madam President, these are not academic questions. These go at the heart of good governance. But I ask these questions for two fundamental reasons. First, the government's own development partners have repeatedly identified implementation capacity as a significant challenge. The Inter-American Development Bank, in its 2024-2028 country strategy with the Bahamas, identifies execution capacity as one of the principal risks to the successful delivery of government's program. That conclusion is supported by the IDB's independent country review program of the Bahamas that found previous government strategies had been overly ambitious relative to the country's implementation capacity. This review identified slow decision-making, limited technical expertise, inadequate intergovernmental coordination, and recurring procurement delays as persistent weaknesses. Most concerning is this report concluded that government had not resolved these long-standing capacity constraints. Madam President, I want to explain the difference between what I'm saying, because I know earlier in the budget debate we would have saw communication from multiple members of the government speaking about how the IMF warned of our economic policies, but the government had somehow, moved in a way that was opposite to what the IMF recommended, but we still had some economic gains. Madam President, the review from the IDB is different because this would have been after a 4-year period where they would have stated that these issues still remain in executing the government's policy. Madam President, if implementation remains a recognized institutional weakness, this speech should have devoted more attention to strengthening the machinery of delivery. Madam President, my second issue is the government has established a pattern of promising more than it ultimately delivers. We don't need to speculate, Madam President. We need only to visit the first speech from the throne, which I have with me today, from 2021, and it reads, "My government will introduce new and progressive building codes to increase resilience in the face of climate change." Madam President, the speech of the throne, May 20th, 2026, and I read, "My government intends to complete and enforce an updated Bahamas building code as part of wider national resilience." Madam President, we are still waiting. And if we continue to go through this document, we were promised accelerated development of the airport in Grand Bahama, still waiting. Comprehensive electoral reform, still waiting. Carbon credit payments for our natural resources, still waiting. Universal pre-primary education for 3- and 4-year-olds, still waiting. Strategic development plans for every island, still waiting. A local government act for New Providence, still waiting. Full implementation of the Freedom of Information Act, we are still waiting. Madam President, I dare not go through the speech of the throne from 2023 because it reveals a similar pattern of the government over-promising to the Bahamian people. Madam President, the history matters because credibility is earned through delivery. Accountability is not achieved by making promises. Accountability is achieved by making commitments and fulfilling them. The Bahamian people deserve more than promises. They deserve clarity. They deserve certainty. That is a standard of governance to which administrations should aspire. Madam President, my second observation is related to climate resilience. There can be no disagreement in this chamber that climate change represents one of the greatest existential threats facing our nation. As my colleague, Senator Watson, would have said, the Bahamas is a low-lying archipelago, has experienced first-hand devastating consequences of hurricanes such as Matthew, Irma, Maria, and Dorian. Every administration has a duty to ensure that our country is not only prepared to respond to disasters, but it is financially equipped to recover from them. It is therefore encouraging to see climate resilience featured prominently in the speech from the throne. The government speaks of updated building codes, environmental protection, blue carbon governance, and the concretization of the National Youth Guard. But Madam President, resilience is not built by speeches, it is built by sustained effort. That is why I find the government's recent fiscal decision to reconcile with this content contained in this speech. In October 2025, Parliament approved a resolution authorizing the transfer of $17 million to the Disaster Emergency Fund and $6 million to the Disaster Prevention Fund. Yet in this budget, the allocation for the Disaster Emergency Fund has been reduced to $3 million, while the Disaster Prevention Fund remains at $6 million. Madam President, that is a decrease of approximately 83% in those funds. At a time when climate risks are increasing and not decreasing, this represents a significant reduction in the financial resources available for disaster resilience. More fundamentally, even these allocations are modest when viewed against the recent disasters. In some cases, losses and damages from disasters exceeded billions of dollars. Therefore,
Madam President.
The
Senator,
chair recognizes Senator Honorable Wayne Monroe.
there is a lot that I would take up with Senator Johnson when I speak, but he is being openly misleading to suggest that the amount budgeted for emergency response is the total budget. The head of emergency response means just that, the first couple days, not the entire response, and I think he knows that.
Madam President, sorry.
Can you respond to the statement?
Madam
made by
President,
Senator Monroe, please.
I wish to table this document. I'll table at the end of my presentation with which notes how much money was transferred to the Disaster Prevention Fund and how much was transferred to the Disaster Emergency Fund in 2005. Madam President, in this allocation, the government reduced it by 83%. I mean, that is simple math. I mean, you don't need to be, it's math. It's simple math. So if that was the case, then why did we allocate $17 million in 2025, but this year it was appropriate to drop to $3 million?
Point of order, Madam President. The problem is, of course, that all of this information is readily available. If you have an emergency fund and you transfer money to it and you don't spend it, unlike the money in the other parts of the budget that go back to the public treasury, some research should be had as to what happens to unexpended monies in a fund. Because the Bahamian people can rest assured, not just this administration, but every administration provides for emergency funding. We may disagree with how it's deployed once the emergency happens, but the Bahamian people can rest assured that all administrations across the years have done responsible provision for emergency response.
Madam President, we could look at the Disaster Risk Management Act of 2022 that requires the government to sustainably fund both the Disaster Emergency Fund and the Disaster Prevention Fund. Madam President, this points to a larger issue. For decades, international organizations, including the Inter-American Development Bank and the World Bank and other development partners, have urged Caribbean governments to establish sustainable disaster risk financing mechanisms. While the Bahamas has access to catastrophic insurance, contingent credit facilities, and other risk financing instruments, which I think the Honorable Senator was alluding to, these measures are simply not enough. And if we want to know, ask the people of Grand Bahama and Abaco who are still languishing to this date. Madam President, climate resilience is not measured by the number of climate initiatives announced or the number of climate change conferences attended. It is measured by a country's financial capacity to withstand and recover from the next major storm. Madam President, the government's words must be matched by its budget, its institutions, and its long-term financial strategy. That is the true test of resilience. Madam President, my next observation relates to energy. The speech from the throne declares, and I want to read directly from the speech from the throne, that reliable and affordable energy remains central to economic competitiveness and the quality of life enjoyed by Bahamian families. Madam President, I wholeheartedly agree. But the lived experience of Bahamians over the past several months tell of a different story with relate to energy in this country. And I give a few examples. In April of 2025, BPL apologizes to consumers for hours of outages. June 2026, repeated outages across New Providence were attributed to equipment failure and surging electricity demand. June 2026, Cat Island residents experienced outage, and BPL apologized for outages at Rake and Scrape Festival. And Madam President, more recently, on June 15, 2026, New Providence rocked by blackouts. Madam President, these are not isolated incidents. They reflect a system that continues to struggle with reliability. The only thing more reliable in this country than electricity bill is an announcement from BPL explaining why the electricity went off. The speech from the throne promises an electricity consumer protection code, energy equity legislation, and local content requirements for energy contracts. Those initiatives have merit, Madam Speaker, but they do not ask the fundamental questions that Bahamians are asking today. When will the lights stay on? When will BPL's most reliable service be electricity rather than outage notifications? And when will the loudest sounds in our neighborhoods be children playing and not generators starting up? Madam President, businesses cannot operate efficiently with unpredictable power interruptions. Students cannot study, clinics cannot function optimally, and families cannot plan their daily lives around recurring outages. The standard is simple. The success of this government's energy agenda will not be measured by speeches or legislative announcements. It will be measured by whether Bahamians experience fewer blackouts, lower electricity bills, and a more resilient power system. Those are the outcomes that matter. Those are the outcomes that the Bahamian people deserve. Madam President, the speech from the throne is more than a statement of intent. It is a covenant with the Bahamian people. Throughout my contribution, I have raised one central concern. Ambition must be matched by execution. When this parliament reconvenes for future speech from the throne, let us not be counting promises still outstanding, but let's be celebrating all promises fulfilled. Enough of the campaigns, enough of the catchy phrases for sound bites. It is time to get to work because Bahamians are overwhelmed. Bahamians are losing trust in political institutions, and Bahamians are tired of promises. And if the voter turnout over the past two elections don't tell us that, then we are simply tone deaf. We as legislators have a responsibility to rise above politics and meet this moment with seriousness, discipline, and purpose. Madam President, I have a role to play in this place, and that is to hold the government to account. I do so using a balanced and evidence-based approach. No rhetoric, no gossip, no untruths. Madam President, I end similarly how I ended my budget debate. What we engage in here today is nation building. Nation building is difficult work. It requires a willingness to accept that no individual, no party, and no administration has a monopoly on wisdom. If you disregard an opposition, then nation building is not for you. If you resent accountability, nation building is not for you. If you reject constructive criticism, then nation building is not for you. Because nation building demands confidence, not conformity, dialogue, not division, and leadership, not insecurity. Madam President, I thank Her Excellency for her gracious delivery of the speech from the throne. I wish her many blessings and God's continued grace. Madam President, may God continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I thank you.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Dr. Trevor Johnson. As many? The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Latre Raming.
What's wrong with it?
The right way.
That's good.
The one on the right. It's broken.
Thank you, Madam President. To my colleague, Dr. Johnson, I will leave it to my senior to respond to most of your contribution in the wrap-up. Madam President, I join my colleagues in extending condolences to the family of the tragic series of accidents that took place in our country over the past several days. Madam President, I rise to support the motion to thank Her Excellency, the Governor General, for the speech from the throne. A speech from the throne must be weighed against the lives of the people who sent us here. So I place before this chamber a simple question, though it carries the full moral weight of public life. When the Bahamians look at this country, do they see themselves in it? That is the question before us. Can they see themselves? Do they see a place where they can own a home, build a business, raise a family, serve, live in dignity? Or do those things still feel reserved for somebody else? That, Madam President, is the work before us. The mission of this government is to build a Bahamas where Bahamians can see themselves. A nation reveals its character by the answer it gives ordinary people. The speech from the throne, at its best, is a public proof that the country has remembered them, their names, their effort, their worry, and their ambition. I think of Alicia, a young woman I met who had done everything a country could ask of a citizen. She studied hard, she worked, she saved, yet every month the dream of home ownership seemed to move a little further away. She didn't ask for privilege. She asked for a fair chance to plant her life on her own ground. She was really asking a deeper question. Is there a place for me in the Bahamas being built? I think of Marcus, a small businessman with the skills in his hand and the vision in his mind. He wanted less than red tape, fair access to opportunity, a system that did not treat ambition as a private club. He was asking whether enterprise in this country belonged to the many or remains guarded by the few. I think of Carol, who told me the hardest part about raising prices was not just the numbers, it was the quiet humiliation that came when a mother works hard and still fares the basics of life slipping away. Food, rent, light, security. She was asking whether the dignity of the ordinary life still stands at the center of public policies. These are not isolated stories. These are the national texts. Can I see myself here? Can my children see themselves here? Will this country hold us with fairness or will pass us by? This mission returns us to the first principle of public life, the social contract between a people and the state. A country asks its citizens for loyalty, work, sacrifice, faith in the common good. In return, the country must provide what gives national life its meaning. Security that can be felt, opportunity that can be reached, fairness that can be trusted, a genuine stake in the nation's promise. That is where the purpose of government comes into sharp view. Politics is, at its core, a decision about how a life of a nation is arranged and who is allowed to stand fully in its promise. There are governments that make peace with a social order in which access, advancement, and ownership gathered around the same circles. And there are governments that understand such concentration as a failure of justice. This government holds the latter view, that opportunity must be widened because the country is strongest when more of its people can find a real place for themselves within it. These are the questions by which this administration will be judged. Can the graduate see a future here? Can the vendor see room to grow here? Can the father see security here? Can the family see a path to ownership here? Can the child of humble beginnings see a path to leadership here? The speech from the throne answers them. It answers the graduate through its commitments to education, training, and employment. It answers the vendors through its agenda for small business and fairness access to opportunity. It answers the father through its program for public safety and economic security. It answers the family through its commitment to housing and ownership. Item by item, the speech takes up the national question and gives its reply. This administration duty is to ensure that public policy answer those questions with the seriousness it demands. And we can meet that duty of this moment only by building a Bahamas in which more Bahamians can say, with confidence and with pride, yes, I can see myself here. Madam President, the time has come to break the back of the culture of opportunity hoarding in this country. By that I mean the quiet protection of the advantage. I mean a social order in which too much access, too much ownership, too much advancement, too much influence gathering around the same people, same circles, and the same names. I mean the narrowing of pathways that ought to remain open. I mean the habit of asking many citizens to contribute to the nation while permitting only a few to share fully in its promise. And consider the damage it does. It teaches people that merit is not enough. It teaches the young that talent may still be made to wait outside the gate. It teaches working families that no matter how hard they labor, the higher ground of national life may remain beyond their reach. In time, it corrodes faith and fairness itself. And a country that loses faith and fairness loses something that it cannot easily recover. Right. This administration will not accept that as our national order of Bahamian life. The speech from the throne makes plain the duty that it is to dismantle it. Our duty is to widen access to capital, widen access to opportunity, widen access to education, widen access to advancement, widen access to leadership. Our duty is to build a Bahamas where the future is not hoarded by the few, but open to the many. For the Bahamas belongs to Bahamians, not a favorite few, not the same circles, the same surnames, the same gatekeepers who have held the door of this nation for generations. This country was built by the hands of ordinary Bahamian men and women, and it's up to us. It is to them its promise is owed. This is what I mean by break the back of opportunity hoarding. It means refusing a country where too many stands at a distance from the promise they help to sustain. It means building one in which every Bahamian can step forward and say, this country has a place for me. That is the national project before us. Let me say this also, Madam President. There is a psychological wound in any country where large numbers of citizens begin to feel that the best of the nation belongs to other people. But there is something else at risk as well. Every country has its physical infrastructure. We build roads, schools, hospitals, docks, and clinics. Yet a nation also depends on another kind of structure, less visible, but just as necessary, the emotional infrastructure of its people. Hope, trust, belonging, confidence, the confidence that the effort will be met, that their effort will be met with a fair chance. Confident that one's child will have a place in the country they inherit. When the emotional infrastructure begins to weaken, cynicism enters public life. Trust starts to thin, talent starts to drift. People begin to lower the expectation of the country and, in time, of themselves. This is why the work of this government is more than economic repair or institutional reform alone. It's about restoring the faith that this nation has room for the ordinary Bahamians, and that is the promise, and that its promise is a wider than narrow circle, and that the future is something they are entitled to help shape. That too is the work before us, to rebuild the emotional infrastructure of our people, so that Bahamians feel in their heart what they must also see in the life of this nation, that this country is theirs. A wise government fights that feeling with every instrument it has. It fights it by extending opportunity. It fights it by making the state fairer. It fights it by proving in practical ways that the birth, surname, class, or connection should never be the final passport to advancement. Our job then is to prove a better service sentence true. People like you belong here. People like you do get opportunities. People like you do build businesses. people like you do own homes. People like you do lead. And so I support the motion of thanks with a full sense of gratitude requires. Gratitude requires to work worthy of the people. It requires a government that has the hidden question beneath the public debate. It requires a country willing to look into its own soul and ask, where its people can find themselves there. The work before us is to build a Bahamas where every Bahamian can see a place for themselves, their children, their future. A Bahamas where every citizen carries dignity. A Bahamas where effort meets rewards. A Bahamas where the distance between the dream and the daily life grows shorter. A Bahamas where the next generation will never ask, with doubt in their voice, whether this country has room for them. They will know, and when that day comes, this nation will do more than govern well. It will keep the faith with its people. The work before us is to build a country that Bahamians can see themselves in. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you for your contribution, Senator the Honorable Latrey Raming. As many? Before we proceed, Senator Trevor Johnson. Please table the references that you made. The ones that you made reference to. Thank you. Sign and date, please. Thank you. Senator Komolafo. Your mic. As many? The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Ellsworth Johnson. Senator Johnson, you have the floor.
Thank you. I don't think it can come up anymore.
Can I come up anymore?
No, ma'am.
What about the other one?
This one?
No, this one, right?
This one? No, ma'am. I think they said they could still. Yes, thank you. Madam President, I rise today to join in the debate on the speech from the throne. And in so doing, I first extend my sincere congratulations to Her Excellency, the Governor General, Dame Cynthia A. Pratt, for the dignified and faithful manner in which she discharged her constitutional duty in delivering the speech from the throne at the opening of the new session of Parliament. At the outset, however, permit me to extend heartfelt condolences to the family of the four young ladies who lost their life. Five. Thank you for your correction, ma'am. I hail from a small community of Cat Island, where there's only about, let's say, 3,000 people. If you have 3,000 there, you have a lot. And so on Cat Island, you know who is in the vicinity if they're driving a car by the sound of the car. And you practically know everybody. And so today, I'm not going to call names, but that island is in mourning. I spoke to my aunt, who's a reverend there, and she said that she went to the school to give some grief counseling to the children, because one can very well appreciate that one of the individuals, they were in the band. One of the urban renewal bands is on Cat Island. So all of the children, they practically know each other. They grow with each other. And so this is a very sad time for Cat Island, and I'm praying for them. Also praying for those that survived the accident. And I'm calling for sobriety in terms of the way they conduct themselves. And also, you know, it's not unreasonable, not just when persons lose their lives by way of a tragic accident, but even when someone comes to the end of their days, for someone to ask about the how, what, when, and why. It's most certainly not unreasonable. So I pray for them, and I join with my colleagues in extending heartfelt condolences to the family. And indeed, the entire country is mourning the passing of such young flowers who have not even had the opportunity to experience life. Madam President, before addressing the content of the speech itself, I believe it is important that we pause to recognize the constitutional office through which the speech is delivered. The speech from the throne is often mistakenly viewed as the personal views of the Governor General. It is not. Constitutionally, it is the policy agenda of the elected government presented through the office. Presented to the office of the Governor General, who serves as the imperial representative of the Crown. It is therefore important that as we deliberate the measures outlined in the speech, we distinguish between the constitutional messenger and the political message or agenda outlined in the speech. That distinction matters because our constitutional democracy depends upon institutions faithfully performing their respective roles. The Governor General does not govern. The government governs. The Governor General does not formulate policy. The elected administration does. Her role is to faithfully and impartially perform the constitutional functions entrusted to her office. Madam President, while recognizing that constitutional distinction, I wish to pay tribute to Her Excellency not merely because of the office she occupies, but because of the example she has set throughout a lifetime of public service. Long before assuming the highest constitutional office in our nation, she made significant contributions to the social and cultural development of the Bahamas. Throughout her years of public life, she has carried herself with dignity, humility, grace, and unwavering commitment to country. Today, she stands as a powerful example to young Bahamian women in an age where public life is often characterized by division, outrage, and personal attacks. Her Excellency demonstrates the strength Her Excellency demonstrates that strength need not be loud, and leadership need not be abrasive. There's a great strength in quiet confidence. There's great authority in dignity. There's great leadership in resilience. She has shown that one may discharge high office with impartiality, fairness, and courage while remaining respectful of every citizen and every institution of our democracy. Those qualities deserve recognition because they remind us that leadership is not measured merely by the authority one possesses, but by the way in which that authority is exercised. With your leave, Madam President, I take this opportunity to thank you, as I'm going through the speech, for the humane and objective observation that you gave this morning about the necessity to protect our children. And I always stop to congratulate those unsung heroes in the person of those ladies who worked at the Women's Crisis Center, Dr. Patterson, Miss Christie, Cleopatra Christie, and all of those persons who have worked over the years to enlighten our country on what can be considered almost an epidemic. When one looks at the statistics of how prevalent the violation of our children, our boys and our girls, is in our country, and our women. And to the extent that you have the violation of our women, girls, and boys, it means that the men have been, and is being violated. And that's why you see what we see in the country. So it would be remiss of me if I did not take this opportunity to stop here to thank you for your humane observations this morning. Madam President, I do not intend to be very long today. We have gone through the speech from the throne. We have deliberated on the heads. And as I sat in my house last night preparing to make this presentation, I am by no means a saint, I'll tell you that. And I don't claim perfection. But I thought about all of the things that is happening in this country. And I heard my learned friend sorry for saying learned friend, Senator Johnson spoke about my presentation earlier today and what I said about the cost of living. And he made mention of the amount minimum wage. And I don't say that to criticize you, because at some point, what I'm going to say here today, it means that all of us around this table and all of us in this country have a lot of work to do, especially when one considers an article that was published on the 4th of November 2024, which looks at the middle-class family, that says that the middle-class family needs $10,000 a month to make it. Yes, it's a research produced by, there's a research produced by the University of the Bahamas. And it goes on to look at a working class family and what that working class family may need. And it looks at what was necessary in 2020. I can send it to you if you want it. And I can have it printed and brought over and laid by the end of May. And yes, thank you. And it says in 2020 it was 4,400, and in 2021 the amount had raised to 4,400 in New Providence and 5,750 in Grand Bahama. And so the research done by the University of the Bahamas, which is accepted, which is not being contradicted, indicates how difficult it is for Bahamians to make it. And as I said, as I was preparing, I thought to myself, and I've listened to a whole lot of speeches, and I said to myself, one of the greatest speech writers and presenters at one time was preparing for a speech. And then when he looked at the people around him, he says, there will be no speech given today. This is an opportunity for us to provide what are the basic needs of the people that are around us. And that was our master when he says, you can't give the gospel, you can't do certain things unless you can provide the basic subsidies necessary for people to self-determine. And so he said, we're going to give them food. He did not give a sermon that day. And that is the master. And so I refer your attention to the recent discussions on the proposed amendment to the Parliamentary Salaries Act. That has been one of the most livest debates. Yes? Pardon me? It doesn't have to, Madam President, we're here to discuss. Thank you. Of course, I know that that would come, and if we intend, and if you send it, we can do it. Yeah. So, no, I'm not distracted by Mr. Monroe. I've known Mr. Monroe for years, and I know his style. Yes. And so, What bait did I fall for, man?
Please proceed, Senator.
You know, Madam President, it's very important that we always have the impression that
My mic is not on.
it doesn't have to be on, that we don't get the impression that you are coming down into the fray. It's very important.
You're saying I'm a mischievous fella.
No,
I don't see how that's getting into the fray.
I know, but it's very important that we don't get that impression, ma'am.
I don't see what's giving you that impression, Senator.
It's what you said, and then you claimed that your mic wasn't on.
Senator, can you please proceed? Because I
I'm-
think you're going further off course.
No, I'm not further off course.
Please proceed.
It's an observation that I've made, and is either right or I'm wrong.
Make your observation.
Thank you.
Be it right or be it wrong.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Your
Thank you.
contribution, that's what we're here for.
And so, and I do appreciate that, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good. And so, I wish to refer to the proposed amendment to the parliamentary salaries. Crave your indulgence. To the Parliamentary Salaries and Allowances Act, which is now a topical issue in the community about the proposed increase in salaries for parliamentarians, senators, and other officials in the parliamentary section. And to say, Madam President, that from the outset, we on this side do not support it. In 2017, the Honorable Prime Minister was quoted as saying that if, and I quote, "If Hubert Minnis believes members of Parliament cannot live on the salaries they are currently making, he should
chair
place
recognizes
himself
Senator the Honorable
in the shoes of
Keenan.
the thousands of Bahamians
Senator
who
Johnson?
live from hand to mouth."
Yes, thank you, Madam President.
Yes,
Point of
Senator
order,
Johnson.
relevance. I don't believe that the proposed legislation that he's speaking to forms a part of the speech from the throne. In addition to that, this is not something that's been tabled before Parliament, which then speaks to the relevance to this chamber. And I don't think this is the forum where he should be speaking from the speech for the throne to be speaking to this. I think that could have possibly come if you want to speak about topical issues, possibly in communications, but certainly there should be refrain to the speech from the throne and anything relevant there too.
It is relevant, Madam
Senator
President.
Johnson, is this reference to the what you're referring to included in the speech from the throne?
Yes, we're
It is-
debating. We're now debating the speech from the throne, and it was identified on page 6 by Her Excellency, the Governor General, that too many Bahamians still feel pressure from the high cost of living. Too many young people are still searching for opportunity. Too many small
second.
businesses still face barriers. And so this
One
is
second,
this.
please, Senator Johnson. I take you. Senator Fox, you resume your seat because we have Senator Raming on the floor. Senator Raming, please.
Well, no,
proceed.
again, I join my colleague on the issue of relevance. The senator is referring to a proposed draft legislation that was not in any document that we have read, that has not gone into consultation, that they have not received as yet. So I think it would be really unfair to this debate to be debating something that is not before this chamber.
Excuse me 1 second, please. The chair would like to hear from Senator Fox.
Thank you, Madam President.
What is the nature of your intervention?
On the point of relevance, I just wanted to point out in relevance,
No, he's the one who's speaking. You want to support him in terms of his point of relevance? You want to address?
in regards to
Okay.
Senator Johnson's point that there was no relevance to Senator Johnson's. That's a lot of Senator Johnsons. Senator Johnson, my learned colleague over here, his point that there is relevance, and I do agree with him. If we look at the speech from the throne, there are I think many statements made about raising the level of cost of living support for Bahamian people. I think we all in here are Bahamian. And therefore, the debate, to your point, Senator Ramming, albeit not presented yet to the floor, is still now a part of public articles that we're allowed to bring to this floor. So whether we can argue positively or negatively about what is fair and what is right and just for Bahamians, including all of us, I think it's well known that we are at the bottom of the scale when it comes to parliamentary compensation in our region. So I don't think that's right for any Bahamian to live in this region at the bottom of the scale. So I will start there. But second of all, it's not about being out of step. I'm in step with the Bahamian people. I'm fighting for what's best for the Bahamian people, and we in our party are also Bahamians. And so my point is only to point out that as we ran, and the election is over, as we ran previously a few months back on fighting for the cost of living, fighting for a wage, as we were discussing, a minimum wage that fits the cost of living and supports the Bahamian people. I think the timing of this conversation is what is most concerning because it does not put the Bahamian people first. It puts some Bahamian people first, and it's their concern with many of us here
Senator.
in this parliamentary sitting is that we always come first. So I'd like to just suggest that in this conversation going forward, whenever it is tabled, if it is ever tabled, that we include all Bahamians in our fight for equality.
Madam President, it is unfortunate that everyone seems to overlook that every public servant received an actual wage increase in the last administration. In fact, the scales were increased across every portion of the public service except the actual parliamentarians. So everybody completely. One may remember the argument when the executive management got their pay increase and it was retroactive. And when it happened for the lower members who were always getting pay increases, they complained that it wasn't retroactive. And so the bottom line to it is this assertion that there is, starting from here, is factually inaccurate. As a matter of fact, Madam President, a fact seldom known is that the Secretary to the Cabinet is paid more than the Prime Minister. My permanent secretary is paid more than me. Lawyers in the Office of the Attorney General are paid more than the Attorney General. So that is the context.
What is the point?
The bottom line to it is it was misleading. It was misleading to say that you start with us. That is misleading because everyone else has gotten it. It is misleading. It is misleading
So
also.
I'm not allowed to speak to it, but Mr. Monroe is allowed to.
I'm responding to Mr.
Can you resume your seat, please allow Senator Kaluti?
Yeah. Madam President, Senator Fox came and made an assertion that I am objecting to as inaccurate. He, in turn, said that instead of starting with us, start with the Bahamian people. That was his bold statement, and it is inaccurate. Plain and simple as that. And that is what I speak to. The fact of the matter is, legislation is drafted in my office. No legislation has been released for consultation yet. How it will look when it's released is yet to be determined. And so that's the bottom line to it. What they say may affect what is released. And they may be surprised, the public may be surprised. Who knows what will happen after the drafting is finished. But that is the work that we do when we're not sitting in this place.
Senator, I'm going to speak with, can you resume your seat, Senator? Just before you, both of you can have a seat for now, for a moment. So, We are here, we are debating the speech from the throne. Resolved that a humble address be presented to Her Excellency the Governor General, thanking her for her most gracious speech at the opening of Parliament. As far as I am aware, I have not been pointed to a section or a paragraph in the speech from the throne that deals with the increase of salaries for parliamentarians. And as a result of that, I think that we've already gone sufficiently down this road without a mandate to do so. And what's on the record, I will allow it to remain on the record. But going forward, I would not be entertaining any further discussions with speculation to a piece of legislation that is not before us, may not come before us, as well as it may come before us. But when it does, in fact, if it comes, we would all have sufficient, or not we, but you all will all have sufficient opportunity to debate and make your contributions at this time. So, accordingly, Senator Johnson, I would like for you to please proceed with your contribution without making any references to the to what you're referring to regarding the proposed or potential, or I don't know, because it's all speculation at this point in time. Bill with respect to parliamentary increases. You can speak once it's not on this point, please.
No,
Because we really want to move on with the speech from the throne, and it's not a part of the speech. So there's a real issue with relevance, as Senator Keenan Johnson initially pointed out.
Thank you, Madam President. I will take your instructions, but I just carefully wanted to add on the Senator Monroe's comments of misleading. I feel that I stood and rose simply to fight on behalf of all Bahamians, and we represent all Bahamians, including ourselves. So I think it's a little disingenuous to say that I misled in some way or misled the Bahamian people by suggesting that in the speech to the throne there is no reference to Bahamians increasing their chances of meeting a cost of living as we all do.
I think Senator Monroe correctly clarified exactly what he was referring to with respect to your statement.
Okay.
So
And
we're
just, lastly, I would just add that as I know the rules, I'm learning the rules. These articles that we see in the newspaper speak to intent, is all I want to point to. And the intent to whether it comes down or not, like you said. We'll discuss it when the time comes.
yes, absolutely.
And I honor that. I just want to make sure that those at the Public Works are taken up as they were in the news yesterday, and that those that have been 16 and 20 years as temps at some point can
Right.
become employees.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Senator Fox. Thank you. Senator Johnson,
Thank you
can you
very
please
much,
proceed with your contribution?
Madam
Be
President.
most grateful. Thank you.
And I hear your directives in not going down a certain road. I know that Mr. Monroe had turned the bend. I don't see him coming back yet. And he was allowed to basically articulate and let me focus on you, Madam President. Yes. And if you could please protect me as the rules requires. Yes. Not that I need it. So, Madam President, it is no secret that this speech from the throne, as I had indicated, highlights the government's policy agenda going forward and how it intends to meet the aspirations, dreams, and goals of its employees and of its employer. And who is the government's employer? It is the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And there's a presentation that I will adopt and refer to. I will significantly redact it since I'm unable to speak to the issue of parliamentary raises. I will not go to that. But the president of, I sure do. The president of the, you want me to sign it and give it to you now?
Yes, because sometimes you forget.
No,
I'd like to call the Henfield still owe me something.
good date, is it?
The second.
2nd of July. Thank you so much.
So in that document, the president of the Bahamas Union of Teachers, President Belinda Wilson, identifies some of the difficulties that are being faced by teachers. And I think when she looks at those difficulties, they can be transported into other areas. And one of the things she speaks to is the arrangement. I heard Senator Johnson ably spoke to, you said it was 60, pardon me? Industrial agreements that the government had signed.
Sign, not action.
Yes. And she,
Sign and action.
and she sought to say that
Sign with that. Sign and action. Sign and action.
there was still outstandings as regard to the, I'm going to sit down, and if you all want to talk, if we're going to have this Holy Ghost moment where everybody speak in different tongues.
Senator Johnson, see, first of all, you asked Senator Johnson a
No,
question.
that's not what happened. That's just not what occurred just now. Everybody could see that there were discussions, and my friend
Because
just
it
next
started
to me.
with you asking Senator
No, but
Johnson a
he had politely responded, and he was quiet. And then my colleague at the end was making an intervention about the disruption. That's how I saw it as it occurred recently.
I think that, as I mentioned earlier, Senator Johnson, as I said to Senator Fox, speak to the chair, right? If you have to ask the senator a question, you ask it through me, and then allow him to respond, and then we move on. But you have to stop engaging the senator.
I'm not,
Speak to the chair,
I
please.
hear you, but I'm not prepared to accept that.
Senator
I
Jo-
engaged Mr. Johnson, he responded, and then there was chatter, and someone right
Hey.
next to you speaking the loudest. And it seems if you did, I don't know, you
Senator
probably don't hear
Johnson.
from that side.
Senator Johnson, can you please proceed with your contribution?
Thank you.
That's all you need to do.
So
Just proceed
what
with your
she,
contribution and speak to the chair.
what President Wilson says in the article that I handed to you, she opines that there are still significant requirements that have not been fulfilled with regard to that industrial relations agreement with the government, one of which is she says that there are still outstanding insurance payments. She goes on speaking for her members to say that they are feeling the pinch from high food prices. And one of the things I heard in the budget outlay was that there was an increase for the breakfast program and for food vouchers. And during the election, thousands of dollars was given away by way of food vouchers. And the question for me, in terms of how, when we look at what is occurring in our society, is there a significant need in terms of persons not being able to fulfill their requirement to give their children lunch or breakfast before they go to school, that the government has to come in? And that is for all of us who was on the road or who campaigned. That was something that is significant. And some of the assertions that I make has absolutely nothing to do with the Progressive Liberal Party. It has to do with us as a people, from whence we came, where we are, and where we're going to go, and whether or not the policy agenda of the government as outlined by, they assert that it's going to do it, Mrs. Simmons, and I'm going to speak to the issue of the banks. You do my heart good to have that type of courage in this environment to do it. And I'll tell you, I spoke to Senator Monroe about the actions of the Bahamas Bar Association for an issue that has been with us for some time. But insofar as we have to provide hundreds of thousands of dollars for breakfast, for food, we must identify in our minds, what does this mean to us? Are these persons unable to meet financially their living obligations? Are they able to pay their light bills properly? Are they able to acquire insurance, house insurance? Speaking about the banks, are they at an alarming rate losing their mortgages? These are real life situations that Mrs. Wilson is identifying in this article when she said there's a pinch. She goes on to speak about the health care, because it affects our members. She goes on to speak about the need for medication and paying the pharmacist, because it's a real life situation. She goes on to speak about the state of our healthcare system, and anybody who sits around the table, who goes to the Princess Margaret Hospital right now and do not see that there's a real need for significant improvement when the present president of the Nursing Association is saying, rather than place hundreds of millions in a new hospital, let's fix this one. Let's provide proper kitchen facilities so that the nutritional needs of the average ordinary Bahamian can be met. And so I've tried my best to go around it, but these are the things that when one looks at the policy agenda outlined in the speech from the throne, you can see that it correlates with what Her Excellency is saying. Now, on the last occasion, I'm going to go to land reform. When I think Mr. Simmons was in here, I spoke about my experience on Cat Island and the need for proper land reform. But in this land reform, as we are attempting to do it, we must seriously consider the thousands of acres of occupied land that is now under occupation by persons who may not be of Bahamian origin. Yes. We have to consider that and how we're going to deal with that. And while we deal with that, one of the most important things, insofar as it's being occupied by human beings, is how do we get the social welfare system in there? See, I was born through Exoma Street. I grew up all around in Angliston, and I was sent to Cat Island as a boy, but in the summer I came back, and I was on Cowpen Road. And as a man, I worked in the Securities and Intelligence branch. You don't want a situation, and Madam President, you spoke to the need to protect our children, and that is in a structured environment. Can you imagine an environment where a social welfare system is not involved in for young girls and for young boys? It is unimaginable. So while we deal with the whole issue of land reform, and while we demonstrate the courage, as in the past, where our colonial forefathers had that courage, and they gave people like Seth Dowd thousands of acres of land, where we find that a Bahamian family has occupied sea to sea. There's a family in Cat Island. When you go to Cat Island and you meet the Seymours, if anybody's gone to Cat Island and meet the Seymours, I'm delighted to go up on the hill, because he celebrates the fact that sea to sea is his, Madam President. because he could have readily shown how his forefathers have consistently, openly, been undisturbed for years, been in occupation of the land. And if we could import constitutions, if we could import commonage, we should be able to create something that Professor Margaret DeMario says is orthogonous, something that springs from the soil. And I want to suggest to the Bahamian people that generation property is something that springs from the soil. It is as Bahamian as conch salad. It is Bahamian as potato or cassava bread. And if any family can show, especially, see, 'cause I see, brother, and I like talking to you. I know your mom and your daddy. Yeah, yes. No. See, you live on the faith, on the blessings of them. Don't get that wrong. You're good. So, if we can have the courage to allow, Madam President, a foreign direct investment, we want them to come to get thousands of acres. And sometimes they don't even do what they're supposed to do. We can find the courage to give ourselves some of that property while clearing off properties that have been unlawfully occupied. I'm going to go now to energy and power. And I heard my colleagues speak. I spoke recently. I don't have them to lay, but there's been a cry on social media that the bills for BPL was recently released. And that, no, I don't need to see yours. And that there has been a hike in those bills. But even if the bills do not correlate with a man that I respect and admire, Ms. Senator Monroe, the lights go off too much.
Yes.
And that is why when we come to the political gymnastics and how we present all these big speeches, the masters say, listen, no speech today,
Right.
no sermon today.
Give me light.
No, feed these people. Give me light. And I say that because
Show me the money.
there are those who live in New Providence who could readily get ice. Think about the persons who move back to the family islands, majority of which are sometimes retirees. They put their provisions on the boat, or they buy them better prices. Nobody can contradict me. Are almost twice as much in New Providence. And the light goes off.
Shameful.
It goes off. They don't have water to bathe with. These are real life situations. While we sit and we pretend, and I'm going to come back over here, that we have done a phenomenal job to help these people. And so there is a need for real and true energy reform. And there should be no excuse for us now, because the ownership of the company is with us. When I say with us, you all know what I mean.
Some of it.
Some
The
of
other
it.
part, we don't know.
The other part we don't know, yeah. So at least we get some. Yes. And so we should have the courage to provide that service to those who need it, because it represents for some people life and death. I go now to the healthcare system. There are many men on the family islands, we don't talk about these simple things, who are facing health issues, women who are facing health issues, and they're sent to New Providence by way of an emergency flight, and all that is emergency is the flight, and for the ambulance to pick you up. And then you get to PMH. And then when you get to PMH, you wait and wait and wait to see a doctor. And then you're given an appointment that's almost 3 months away. Or you're told the surgery that you need, you can't get it because there's a long waiting list. And these are real life situations as we sit And we talk, and nobody around the state, if you don't understand that these things are happening on a daily basis, you're out of touch. You're just out of touch. And I'm happy that the Governor General, in the speech from the throne, realized that there is some difficulty. And I know that when you're on the other side, you want to give the impression as if all is well and we're working extremely hard. And that's why you have the opposition. All is not well. All is not well in the banking system. You're right. Sometimes it depends on the color of your skin. And not very many people have the courage that Mr. Simmons have. I spoke to Mr. Monroe before I left today about the workings of the bar. I would like to congratulate and thank Mr. Arthur Dion Hanna Jr. and Mr. Malcolm Adley, and through you, Madam President, to Mr. David Forbes. I invite him to get a copy of the committee report on banking in the Bahamas. It highlights all of the difficulties that they were facing some 30, 40 years ago, where there was an irregularity in terms of what they applied in their home country and what they give you here. You don't hear, but now loans are down. At some point, they were giving you 8%. It was crazy. And they got away with it. And now, you're right. There's liquidity. But they prefer to give you a loan for a car, a $60,000 car, $100 and something thousand car. I went to get a car. I said, I can put my family in that. But these are the realities that we face, and I say that for a reason. We need persons like yourself who can identify a perennial injustice in this country that has held Bahamians back for the longest time, where some of them would have presented portfolios on business ideas, and they did not get it. Only see someone else open it up. Let me say, you could do what you want in here, but there's some people out on the streets who are under the dilly tree, who are under the fig tree. They are like the little girl on the side of the road. And I can't call that word because it's not parliamentary. Pardon me? They say you're BSing when they see you. And that's why I commended you for what, Madam President, what you said about children. They need teachers in our schools. That's what the President is saying. If they're going to participate, they need to be in an environment where the teacher, and I can call some names, the teacher, the possible pastor, the possible police officer, the young man who may come into the home and is dating the mother, do not violate them. You go to that prison. And I think Senator Monroe could confirm this. The majority of those young persons are there because at some point in their lives they were disappointed and they were hurt. So we have to keep the lights on. We must keep the lights on. Let me give some free advice. Duck in early. Just win the elections. Still go down through those corners. I see Brother Watson is staying close to Southern Shores. Still, there's nothing wrong with that. His office there too. Yes. So still go through those corners. Still visit. Sometimes they don't want anything from you. So housing is very important. I've dealt with health care, national security. There were two volumes I referred to when I gave my presentation on the budget. And that was the 1984 Commission of Inquiry, which looked at the prevalence of drug trafficking through the Bahamas, the prevalence of drug trafficking and its social effects. And it said that it affected every last institution in our country, the judiciary, the church, every last one, the banks, the trust companies, and 20 years later, during the Laura Quinn incident, the then representative for the American Embassy, Mr. Blankenship, gave a scathing review on drugs that had gone missing from a vessel, a Defense Force vessel. Not only that, there was the allegation that tons of drugs was being moved through the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Pardon me? Not just that. There was an identification in there, Mr. Monroe. And I was in, yes, sir. And I was, yeah, you did, Mr. Monroe did the case and I did the commission case. And it looked at the connectivity, the regional connectivity of drug trafficking and its effect on the world, and how the Bahamas, through no fault of its own, is placed in that route. Recently in 2024, I think, as an article that I have with the Honorable Senator Monroe, when he then served as the Minister of National Security, entitled Loss of Trust, which indicated that, again, that issue of tons of drugs moving through this country was again a relevant fact. And Mr. Monroe, as he, Minister of National Security, as he then was, spoke to the issue of, I have a copy of it, of the allegations made, not only against some of our security officers, forces officers, but allegedly about a high-ranking politician. It didn't say which side or whatever side it was. And in that article, I must, Mr. Monroe unequivocally denied any association with anything, any of the allegations, so I must say that. But the reason why I raise it again, we can play as crazy as we want. If you're a man of the streets, if you're out there and you don't know what may be happening, you need to go home, because the interdictions have gone up. A gentleman that I've known, I'm not going to call any names, but what I would want us to do, because I have the report from '84, I have the report from the Laura Quinn, and now the recent articles, that we must not repeat the past. Dr. David Allen wasted no energy in telling us what the social, cultural, and economic crisis was for us. And the reason why I speak so passionately about it is because I was a boy on the island. When they came, they really came. When they locked down an island, they really locked down an island. And so we must be extraordinarily careful about what may be upon us and take every precaution to deal with that issue. I'm going to lay over the document to you. I deliberately did not go into it to call names, Madam President. This is the a Guardian document to which I referred to Minister Monroe, and entitled Eroded Trust, and it outlines what concerns were expressed by our counterparts. So you don't want to see it. You don't want it.
I'm just questioning your relevance to.
The relevance is that in the speech from the throne, we spoke to safety and national security. And we are in the belt of a passageway that all of the experts,
What is the date of this document that you're referring to?
that all of the experts have acknowledged November 29, 2024. That all of the experts have acknowledged is one of the major drug transshipment routes. And so if we're talking about national security and safety and our Royal Bahamas Police Force, these are some of the things that we would want to concern ourselves with.
And the most recent you have is November 2024.
I can get some more for you. Like there's some,
Is that the most recent?
the most recent, because I think, yes, because it's, to my mind, I thought it was germane to my presentation. I could get you some more recent
No,
ones.
I'm just asking. I'm just asking.
Yes, this is the most recent that I have, but I can get you some more recent ones.
Go ahead, table.
Thank you. And so, as we speak to national security and safety, I know that in the House below that the leader of the House business have indicated that the government is going to seriously deal with the whole issue of increments look into it and have that discussion for increments for police officers. It was raised in the House and he responded. No, there's a matter where the retired officers, yes, gratuity, yes. What's the date?
Second.
Okay. Hang on a minute. Okay. How much more? 2 more minutes. Oh, wow, it's gone. And so the reason why and I'll go quickly to my conclusion, the reason why I speak about the safety and security and the security forces, because I was once a police officer. I spent 14 years there. I wasn't promoted. They said, yeah, they said that I was too unruly and uncontrollable. I don't know how it was. But I am grateful. My father wrote a letter to the then Minister of National Security, thanking the Royal Bahamas Police Force for investing in me, adopting me, training me, and ultimately reposing the confidence in me to give me an in-service award. And he always told me, he says, you had it very hard, but remember, while you were sleeping, there were those officers on the streets who came in and they took care of business while you were out of country. So I would like to express my profound gratitude to the members of the Royal Bahamas Police Force, to the commissioner, first woman commissioner of police, Ms. Shanta Knowles. I wish you every success and blessings, and I thank you all for the contributions that you've made to my life. And so, with regard, I'll go on. With your leave, may I have a few more minutes, Madam President?
How much are you requesting?
Can I have 20?
Not today.
Everybody,
That must be a joke.
we going back.
That must be a joke.
We going on. I wanted to smile. I wanted to smile from Madam President.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
What about 5?
4 minutes and 30 seconds.
Grateful, Madam President,
have 5
for your forbearance, ma'am. Immigration. In my presentation, I spoke to the Nationality Act and the implementation of that act. I spoke to Article 13, and it's an act that allows for the persons to be registered as citizens of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And I hear I hear Mr. Senator, the Honorable Wayne Monroe, speak to the reasoning for the amendment to be able to give permanent residence to those persons. I'm still of the view that the act, the spirit and intent of the act, is not one that allows that the matter should go back to the department to have those administrative officers deal with it. And there is a serious concern by members of the community, Madam President, when it comes to immigration. And some of their concerns, I've always heard persons speak to xenophobia. And I've always taken the opportunity to say that for someone to assert their right as a Bahamian, to want the best for the Bahamas, to say that there are certain things in the Bahamas that should only be for Bahamians is not xenophobia. It's just being a Bahamian. But we must accord to everybody the basic human right that's outlined in our Constitution to be protected. And, I would like to highlight a recent case, separate and aside from the alleged swearing in of someone at a funeral, given citizenship at a funeral, and a case that was decided by the Supreme Court recently, and I brought a copy to lay over to Madam President, this Honorable House. And in that, the then Deputy Director indicated that an individual got citizenship in 8 days. The court had to call someone from immigration to explain this, because it says before the trial started, he was not a citizen. And the Deputy Director, and it's in the case, is a public document, Mr. Dwight Bentley said, it's got to be a miracle, because in his 43 years of being in the Immigration Department, he had never seen something like this before. He'd never seen something like that before. That is his view.
Order. I hate
Chair,
to, and I will just speak generally. There is a known case of a relative of a politician, not a PLP politician, obtaining citizenship in under a week, not having been born here, through marriage. So I think Senator Johnson ought to be careful, because malicious people may disclose it. But to say that it does not happen, not that anyone says that it shouldn't have happened. I don't think anyone begrudged the young man who was married to a Bahamian, of a person with status, so it clearly isn't a marriage of convenience, getting citizenship, but it did cause alarm that it happened in under a week.
I think,
Thank you, Senator Monroe.
with respect, Senator Monroe is anticipating what I have to say. There's some other things that I'm going to say surrounding it. Because what he said, that there was no evidence that there was an interview, that this person was unable to identify or explain the meaning of the coat of arms. He referred to the marlin as a fish and to the flamingo as a bird. That he went on to say there was no file found in the department, because he was called to explain this. And he said, this has got to be miraculous. Nothing to demonstrate that this matter had come through the Immigration Department, or no records were found anywhere of this person. And the reason why the court wanted to find out, because it was a very sensitive matter. And the court wanted to know, how did this come to be in circumstances where the person, and it doesn't really matter sometimes if you can't speak English, because if you qualify, you qualify, but things just did not fall into place. And these are some of the things that Bahamians are concerned about. Not only that, we live next to one of the most powerful nations in the world, and we have an obligation to guard our borders and guard it jealously. And so, Madam President, I am grateful for your forbearance in extending the time. I thank Her Excellency, the Governor General, for the speech from the throne, and I rest. Thank you. May I, Madam, for all the times, I just for the record, because it may not have been taken into consideration, for all the times that I was interrupted and we got up, was that time? You sure? Okay, I wouldn't question you. Okay. I got to go back to him. Yes. The former Chief Justice, if I may, when we got called to the bar, he told the young lawyers, "Now you going, Mr. Monroe, you're going down to the registry. All I say is be careful." Okay? So thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Johnson, for your contribution. As many? The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Deasante Small. Senator Small, you have the floor.
All right. Madam President, you could believe my word when I say I will be brief. And I rise today to join my colleagues in expressing sincere gratitude to Her Excellency, the Governor General, for the delivery of the 2026 speech from the throne. Her Excellency's address was more than a statement of the government's legislative priorities. It was a vision for the next chapter of our nation's development, a vision rooted in hope, responsibility, and the belief that the best days of the Bahamas are still ahead. The speech outlined an agenda that seeks to strengthen our economy, modernize public services through digital transformation, improve access to health care, increase opportunities for home ownership, protect consumers, create pathways for entrepreneurship, strengthen national security, and invest in the greatest asset this country has ever possessed, its people. Madam President, today, however, I wish to dedicate my contribution to a very special group of Bahamians, the graduating class of 2026. Whether you recently graduated from high school, completed your studies at the University of the Bahamas, or another institution at home or abroad, earned a technical certification, a diploma, a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, or a doctorate, today I say to you, congratulations. Our country celebrates you. You have persevered through uncertainty, adapted to a rapidly changing world, sacrificed, remained disciplined, and crossed one of life's important milestones. But I want you to understand something. The speech from the throne was in many ways about you. When we speak about modernizing government through digital transformation, we are speaking about creating a Bahamas where your innovation has room to flourish. When we speak about strengthening healthcare, we are creating opportunities for the next generation of doctors, nurses, pharmacists, psychologists, public health professionals, and healthcare innovators to serve their country. When we speak about expanding access to affordable housing, we are speaking about helping your generation build homes, families, and financial security. When we talk about entrepreneurship, workforce development, and economic opportunity, we are speaking about ensuring that your talent is not limited by your circumstances, but empowered by your country. Madam President, when we talk about and when we speak about education, skills training, and public sector modernization, we are acknowledging that the future economy will demand creativity, adaptability, and lifelong learning. This legislative agenda is not simply about today's Parliament. It is about their tomorrow. Madam President, as I prepare these remarks, I was reminded that it was just 20 years ago that I stood where the graduating class of 2026 now stands. This year marks 20 years since my classmates and I graduated from St. John's, well, the St. John's College, as the class of 2006. Reflecting on where life has taken us over the past 2 decades is both humbling and inspiring. Many of my classmates have become doctors, educators, entrepreneurs, public servants, uniformed branches members, parents, and leaders in our communities across our nation and beyond. 20 years ago, none of us knew exactly where life would lead, but we all shared something in common. We had hope. We had ambition. We believed that with hard work, faith, and opportunity, we could build meaningful lives and make meaningful contributions to our country. As I listened to the speech from the throne, I thought about that same sense of promise. Because the policies outlined before this Parliament are ultimately about creating opportunities for a new generation of Bahamians to discover their own path, contribute their talents, and help shape the future of our nation. So to the graduating class of 2026, embrace this moment. And I say that to all young people because the future will not always unfold exactly as you have planned. There will be unexpected opportunities, unforeseen challenges, and moments that test your resolve, but remain grounded in your values. Continue to learn, serve others, pursue excellence, and never lose the hope, the ambition, and the hunger that brought you to this milestone. I pray that 20 years from now, when you reflect on your own journey, you will see not only careers and accomplishments, but lives change because of the difference you choose to make. The class of 2026, Madam President, enters the adulthood at a defining moment in our nation's history. The Bahamas is investing in its people like never before. Through initiatives such as Upskill Bahamas, greater access to skills training, digital transformation across the public service, expanded opportunities for entrepreneurship, investments in healthcare, housing, and education, our country is laying the foundation for the workforce and economy of tomorrow. These investments are not simply programs, they are pathways. Pathways for young Bahamians to acquire new skills, to build successful careers, to start businesses, to innovate, to create jobs, and to contribute meaningfully to national development. The question now is not whether opportunity exists. The question is whether or not they are prepared to seize it. Some of these graduates and our young people will become entrepreneurs, creating opportunities for others. Some will become educators, inspiring the next generation. Some will choose careers in healthcare, strengthening the well-being of our people. Some will become engineers, artists, financial professionals, scientists, farmers, technologists, and public servants, helping to shape a stronger Bahamas. And perhaps, Madam President, among this graduating class are future members of Parliament, senators, ministers, and even a future Prime Minister. Whatever path they may choose, I want to encourage them to never stop learning, invest in their own development, take advantage of the opportunities available to them, serve their community with humility, lead with integrity, and remain curious. I remember that the greatest investment they will ever make is in themselves, because when young Bahamians grow, our communities grow. When our communities grow, our nation grows, and that is how we shape the future of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. As we celebrate the achievements of this graduating class, our nation's joy has been interrupted by profound sorrow. Our hearts remain heavy following the tragic loss of several young Bahamians in the recent traffic accidents. To every grieving mother and father, brother and sister, grandparent, classmate, teacher, and friend, please know that this nation mourns with you. There are moments when words simply are not enough. Lives filled with promise, dreams not yet realized, potential that seemed limitless, gone far too soon. It is my prayer that God grants every family his comfort, his strength, and his peace during this unimaginable season of grief. May he remind them that although life on earth is temporary, love never truly leaves us. Madam President, among those we mourn is a remarkable young woman whose future was incredibly bright, Diamond Stubbs. Diamond was not only one of our nation's outstanding graduating seniors, she was also one of the recipients of the 2026 Honors Day Scholarship and Awards Program hosted by my sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Eta Psi Omega Chapter. She was one of my babies, Madam President. For the past 3 years, I've had the distinct privilege of serving as co-chair of this dynamic program. Each year, we welcome and celebrate the top graduating female seniors from across the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, young people whose academic excellence, leadership, service, and character represent the very best our nation has to offer. Diamond was no exception. As head girl of Old Bite High School and the recipient of numerous university scholarships, she embodied the qualities we hope to cultivate in every young Bahamian. She was poised, purposeful, accomplished, and full of promise. Like so many of our Honors Day recipients, she looked to the future with optimism, ready to make her mark on this nation and the world. It is difficult to reconcile that only weeks after celebrating her achievements, we now gather as a nation to mourn her passing. Her loss is not only felt by her family, her classmates, and the Old Bite High School community, it is also deeply felt by our Honors Day family. We celebrate these young people because we believe in their potential, and Diamond's life reminded us so beautifully of what that potential looked like. So to Diamond's parents, family, and loved ones, please know that you remain in our prayers. On behalf of the Honors Day Committee and my sisters of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Eta Psi Omega Chapter, our chapter president, Ramona Davis Wells, we extend our deepest condolences and pray that God grants you comfort, strength, and peace in the days ahead. Though her life was cut far too short, Diamond's legacy, along with all of those other young women, they were a legacy of excellence, leadership, and service. And it is my prayer that we will continue to inspire generations of Bahamian students who will follow in their footsteps. Madam President, if I may, as we prepare to celebrate the 53rd anniversary of the independence of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, I extend heartfelt independence greetings to every Bahamian throughout our family islands across our archipelago and to those proudly representing our nation around the world. This year's national theme, Celebrating Our Heritage, Shaping Our Tomorrow, speaks directly to the vision set forth in the speech from the throne. Our heritage is reflected in the sacrifices of those who came before us in our culture, our music, our family islands, our resilience, and our shared belief that together we can build a stronger nation. Our tomorrow will be shaped by the choices we make today. It'll be shaped by the very legislation we pass in these chambers, by the opportunities we create, by the investments we make in our young people, by the strength of our institutions. It is also strengthened by our collective commitment to leave this country better than we found it. As we celebrate another year of nationhood, may we never take for granted the freedoms we enjoy, nor the responsibility we all share in safeguarding them. May we celebrate safely. If I would take a moment, Madam President, to join you in saying, I want our young people to take it very seriously when I say Slow down. Wear your seatbelts. Do not drink and drive. Your parents want you to return home safely. Yes, have fun, but be safe and responsible. Bahamas, may we continue to uplift one another, may we continue to believe in one another, and may we continue working together to build a Bahamas where every child has hope, every family has opportunity, and every citizen has the chance to reach his or her fullest potential. It is my intent and best wishes to our country. Happy 53rd Independence, Bahamas. Madam President, as I close, I return to the central message of the speech from the throne. Government can pass legislation, can create opportunity, can build infrastructure, can modernize institutions. But the future of this nation will ultimately be determined by the hearts, minds, and character of its people. To the graduating class of 2026 and every young Bahamian everywhere, walk boldly into your future, knowing that progress is taking place every day. Dream without limits, serve without seeking recognition, lead with humility, build businesses, strengthen communities, innovate with purpose, love this country enough not only to benefit from it, but to help build it. Because the Bahamas envisioned in the speech from the throne will only become reality through a generation willing to transform opportunity into action. May God continue to bless every graduate, every young person. May God comfort every family that mourns. Happy 53rd to this beloved country of mine, and may God continue to bless and guide the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Deasante Small, for your contribution. As many. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Wayne Monroe.
Thank you, Madam President. Again, Madam President, as I rise in this honorable place, it's because today the Lord woke me up and clothed me in my right mind, and I pray that He continues to do so. Madam President, it is the case that great tragedy and calamity often focuses the mind. And we have had condolences to the family of the 4 young ladies who died in New Providence and the young lady who died in Grand Bahama, and then unfortunately there was a young man who died in New Providence again. But the statistics show that 59 persons died in traffic accidents last year. 59 Bahamians. And so, Madam President, as we mourn with the families, and it is shocking to see such promise lost. And I say it, Madam President, not only because it's happened now, but I would wish to incorporate it in my remarks with regard to speech from the throne. Because we always talk about opportunity. And what we must grasp as a nation is that a government may create opportunities, but it takes people to seize them and make them happen. And that's why the Prime Minister always says that the success of his administration is not his success, it's not the administration's success, but it's the success of the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Madam Speaker, we've had great praise for, and I mean no disrespect when I refer to the Governor General as Mother Pratt. In truth and in fact, I think that that's the moniker she would prefer, since she's been known for it for much longer in her life. And it is appropriate that the Governor General, the head of state, would be called a mother in this nation. She is a humble woman who has worked hard. When I was Minister of National Security, we had many conversations. She was the first female Minister of National Security in this country. And her mantra always is, we have to try to do something to reach our people. And she has a particular affinity for our young men. And she visited on a number of occasions the Bahamas Department of Corrections on one occasion and spoke to the young men there. And her concern and care is real. And Madam President, before I leave this aspect, I would just caution us that there is a young man in all of these events who is facing consequences. Because in any traffic accident, as Senator Ellsworth Johnson knows as a policeman, there are investigations involved. And we must be very careful as a nation that we do not seek to simply destroy persons. I had the privilege yesterday, as I'm the acting Minister of National Security, as my colleague Minister LaRoda is out of country, to participate in the Pathway for Peace program put on by Mrs. Patrice Ellis, preparing men for release back into society from the Bahamas Department of Corrections. What is very notable is that any person who is committed, or I should phrase it like this, 98% of the persons who are committed to the Bahamas Department of Corrections will be released. And so we must be very careful about how we go about dealing with that portion of our society, because they too are people who need to seize the opportunities provided to succeed and make our country succeed. But Madam President, just one passing comment, and I don't mean, well, I do mean to be scathing with it, and that is this. Negative thinking has been found scientifically to have adverse consequences on how your neural networks are wired, leads to depression, leads to disassociation. And so, Madam President, we must be careful that if nationally we adopt negative thinking, then it may manifest itself in a number of ways. And so, if you keep seeing the cup as half empty, your mind will approach everything in that fashion. And so, I am not surprised about low voter turnout. I listened to the radio for 4.5 years. I listened to a narrative that was driven by negativity. I listened to a narrative that might discourage a lot of persons from participation. And so when it succeeds in its purpose, it behooves us to complain about the consequences of our actions. Because if you continue to say things, people will seize them and believe them. And if they are told constantly that there's no purpose in the system, why would you expect them to engage with the system? And so I just lay a cautionary tale that we are not as bad as I set out in my budget contribution as our counterparts in the Caribbean, where participation falls as low as 40%. But we must be careful that if we continue a drumbeat of cynicism, that we will get there. And we may get there quicker than we think if we continue this drumbeat of negativity. And for the life of me, I cannot understand what funds it. And let me say this, I smiled when Senator Fox spoke to the American dream, the Bahamian dream, because that was a part of my presentation. Slightly differently. I was going to build in a little congratulations of the Americans for 250 years of independence. That is how much they've had. The American dream articulated, taken from their Declaration of Independence, is that regardless of someone's background, they can achieve success upward mobility, and prosperity through hard work and determination. That's the American dream. Now, if you stop and think about it, if you look at every country down through the years, that's not unique to the Americans. But just as the World Series of baseball only involves American baseball teams, they have appropriated something for their own. And that's quite all right, but this would be the equivalent, I would think, of what you would look at as the Bahamian dream. But we just had a case decided by the US Supreme Court, Trump and Barbara, where it was set out that people of color fought for American independence, but yet the US courts, in a case called Dred Scott, said that they couldn't be citizens. And then you had a civil war, and then you had the 14th Amendment, which was the subject of the case. That is a whole 90 years. The 14th Amendment was in 1868, I do believe, a full 90 years or more after they actually had independence. It took them 90 years to simply say that people who fought for independence, their offspring could be Americans. But during that 90 years, there was the American dream. It just did not exist for the children of slaves. It was as simple as that. And then, after the 14th Amendment, you had segregation. You had the Jim Crow laws. And it would appear that the American dream was not alive for large swathes of persons. You had young black men being sent to Vietnam to die for a country that still practiced, where they still weren't fully accepted. But the American dream was alive from 1776. And then Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement came, and the Bahamas was somewhere where he found solace, and the Bahamas was somewhere where he found peace to renew. And then, one would say, perhaps as late as that, you finally had the full embodiment of the American dream. Now, I don't say this to criticize our neighbors and friends, but I say it by way of contrast, because this year, we celebrate 53 years of independence. Now remember, it took them 90 years to decide that the children of people who gave their lives for their independence could be citizens of this country that their parents had died for. It took them 90 years, 90 whole years. We are 53 years from our independence. And I'm just concerned that we lose focus and context. I was amazed, Madam President, when Senator Simmons said that he went to Grand Bahama in 1968. I was born the 1st of March, 1968. And he said he stayed there till 1990. I returned from law school, August 1990. So for that whole period, from my birth to my qualification as a lawyer, one of our senators speaks to that, and that's just a part of his life. And I say that to say this, Madam President. We live in a microwave culture. We live in a made-for-news culture. We live in a 24-hour news cycle culture. And so there becomes an expectation on some that everything must happen now. Some people call this the now generation. But again, I caution us, Madam President, not to get caught up with that as politicians. Because I remember well in that other place for 4.5 years, hearing about the utility wars in Eleuthera. And Eleuthera returned 2 PLP members of parliament. And what does that say? What that says, Madam President, is that not everyone is caught up in a culture of negativity. If people see that progress is being made. The complaint, if you remember, Madam President, towards the last term was all these Pike people around doing all these things and all of that. So clearly people saw that you had an administration who is addressing a problem, a systemic problem. So if this problem is built up in 53 years, nobody who is sensible can think that it will be resolved in 5 years. That was exactly the argument that the first Davis administration made, and that's the argument that the Bahamian people accepted. And what they say is that we must have a chance to finish and follow through. And that's what it's all about. So starting the drumbeat again may be kind of self-defeating. And that's the simple point that I make. But I hope I'm not listened to. Because if I'm not listened to, and that's a losing proposition, and you continue with a losing proposition, I was going to say you get what the duck got, but that's not a nice thing to say.
It's absolutely not. It should be struck from the record. Mr. Monica.
I withdraw it. I withdraw it. I withdraw it.
He isn't
I
even-
withdraw it.
Wait.
I withdraw it unreservedly.
Pardon me? No. No.
I
but
withdraw it.
he would-
I withdraw it unreservedly.
Without intervention, my learning.
It has been withdrawn. Withdrawn. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Monroe.
Yeah. Madam President, you know, we have in this day and age, if there is any doubt whether the Bahamian dream is alive, all we need to do, everyone knows young MJ, right? That's the embodiment of the Bahamian dream.
Yes.
Where else can a 12-year-old go to Government House? And nobody is suggesting that he is high-born or is from a prominent family, but he goes to Government House. He goes to OPM. He is sitting in the Senate. He has conversations with the President of the Senate. I do believe he's with Senator Fox. What else is and the Prime Minister, what else will tell you that the Bahamian dream is alive and well when a 12-year-old can have all of that access to all of the organizations? And what that shows is this, Madam President, that it is alive. It is alive and well. And Madam President, you know, I'll get to some of the chirping because I got my light bill. And I am very happy with my light bill. No, you better pay your light bill, because whether the light is on or not, if you don't pay your light bill, yours will be off. Madam President, the one thing that I think Bahamian people understand is this. We talk about record heat, and that's the case around the world. So Bahamian people ain't silly. I know, Madam President, that if my usage goes from 783 kilowatt hours to 1,225 kilowatt hours, my bill can be higher. But you know, the one thing I do know, Madam President, the one thing that I do know that is very good and makes me feel happy and content is that this guy, oh, sorry. I, I was in the spirit.
Thank you, Senator Monroe. The chair recognizes Senator Fox. What is the nature of your intervention, Senator Fox?
Point of order, misleading and confusing the Bahamian people, me being one of the Bahamian people.
You confused?
I am completely confused by that math. If I heard you correctly, and Madam President, he can restate it if I'm incorrect, but I heard it pretty clearly. His light bill experience may be a different one, but I think you said, Senator Monroe, that whether your light bill is on or off, you still have to pay it,
Yeah.
because it'll go off.
No.
So I don't understand the difference.
No.
What is off is off.
Okay, no.
And so at what point can we trust that if we pay our bill, it's going to stay on?
No. I see the confusion. The point I make is simply this. If you do not pay your bill, if the light is off, your light will be off. If you don't pay your bill and the light is on, your light's still going to be off because they can disconnect you. That's the simple point. You clear?
Senator Fox, please proceed. Thank you.
Madam President, I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. It sounds like we should then,
Pay our
I could be wrong, if we're not sure about the percentages of the light being on or off at any point in time when it comes to our power bills, it may be better to live a fantasy and roll the dice and just gamble and not pay. Is that what you're suggesting?
No, not at all. You have a choice. It's a free country. Nobody can force anyone to do anything. But the one thing I do know, Madam President, is for the first time under any government, the first 200 kW is free. And you know, that's overlooked because people talk about the very poor. Well, the constituency that I represented has some people who are very rich. They live in Ocean Club Estates. And you have some people who live in the inner city. And for some people who live in the inner city, they never consume more than 200 kW a month because they don't have the luxury of having air conditioning. They don't have the luxury of having many things that other people have. So for some people, 200 kW of electricity for the very poor in this country is significant. Now, for the person who air conditioned their house 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at 60 degrees Fahrenheit, they are a little bit more affluent than a large portion of our society who can exist on 200 kW. And so, Madam President, that is the reality of that. And we've spoke in the speech from the throne about affordability. And I think a point made by one of the senators on my side is this. People talk about things being tough. I would invite all Bahamians in the months of July and August, when you travel in the airport, I want you to look around and see how many families are going on cruises because they are enjoying company with themselves, and that is a good thing. And so, Madam President, I would ask to look at that. And you know the frustration that a lot of people, and one of my cousins told me this, and I had to rebuke him. He said to me, I wish the price of gas could go up another $9 because there's still too much traffic on the road. And I rebuked him. I felt what he had to say because on the weekend when I drive, you have people just sightseeing. Just sightseeing. And I don't begrudge them that, Madam President. I don't want it to be taken in the wrong way. The people that take up space on the road, who aren't going to work, who aren't going to do anything productive, that is their right. Those who go and drive around to see the island with their spouse or children, on the weekend, that is their right. And it is as simple as that. And so, Madam President, the one thing that this government admits, and I need to clarify the saying, it isn't you will wipe every tear from every eye, it's that you attempt to wipe every tear from every eye. It is, we will wipe every tear from every eye is taken from the Bible. For those who aren't quite heathens, and so still do read the Bible, because heathens don't read the Bible. For those who are not quite heathens and read the Bible, it's a continuing thing. And so, Madam President, it is as simple as that. I have a copy. I have it on my phone, Madam President. But, Madam President, the point that is made simply is this in all seriousness. In coming to office, we said that we would attack the problem. We identified it. We said that we would attack it. We said what we would do. We set it out. We have tracked how much of what we promised to do we did, and it's 80%. Now, remember the half full, half empty? This isn't even one of those. It's not a 50-50. It's a 80-20. So you no longer can say it's half full or half empty. You have to say, y'all ain't do 20% of the things y'all say y'all was gonna do. And and then to say that as a criticism, anybody saying that would be run out of Dodge. See, you could say half empty. That don't sound too bad. To say you only did, you have 20% left to do. My word, Madam President, I think you hold 15% of the construction price as retention when you build a house. So we just 5% short of that. And they say we wicked and evil. We wicked and evil, and we just promising things because we only do 80% of it. More than 80% of it. And you know, Madam President, we put it online. We put it online. And you know the amazing thing about having put it online, Madam President, is you would have expected an aggressive critique. Well, you lie about this, you lie about that. We catch you with we ain't had none of that. 80%. Now, at the end of the day, Madam President, at the end of the day, Madam President, for a country that, and I'll address the whispers.
Stay focused.
No, it falls in my presentation, I just bring it up. Nobody believes you snap your finger and get LNG. No serious people. No serious people. No serious people, Madam Speaker. So when you say it's in process, and they complain about the contracts for gasification and the terminal and the pipeline, and so they know that it is happening. And so unless they want to say to the Bahamian people, we want you to take us serious as a government. And in the time that they've approached this, they've lined up a gasification thing. They've lined up a pipeline to carry it to Blue Hills. They've done this. They wicked. They ain't get it finished. You should have had it finished. Yeah, wicked. Madam President, I am rejoicing. I am rejoicing that my third son, one of my children, finally says he wants to be a lawyer. Finally, right? I'm so happy. But what I will not do is at the end of the year say, boy, you ain't a lawyer yet. I will not do that. I will not line him up and say, boy, you tell me you can be a lawyer. You ain't a lawyer yet. It's December 2026. You ain't a lawyer yet. And you know, December 2027, I ain't gonna stand him up and say that either. And I ain't gonna say it in 2028, and I ain't gonna say it in 2029. And so, Madam President, the one thing where business people determine if you're serious is when they see how you speak about time frames to accomplish things. So that's how that actually happens. You talk about fixing systemic problems. The people in Eleuthera were told that. They witnessed the work that was happening. Yes, they still have issues. Yes, they still have problems. And every day in the House of Assembly, poor Central and South Eleuthera was harassed with it, especially when he was the Minister of Works in the last couple of years. And you would have thought that if people believed that reasoning, he would not be there today. But he is, by a wider margin than he won previously. But as I say, Madam President, free advice, unsolicited advice, is seldom appreciated and hardly followed. But I gave it anyway. But it'll continue. I'm pleased to hear that they have no intent to follow the advice and wish to continue the behavior that got them beat 3 straight. 3 straight, not 2 straight, 3 straight. They got them beat in West Grand Bahama and Bimini, Golden Isles, then a massive beating in 2026. But there you go. Madam President, I would never criticize ambition. If any government accomplishes 100% of what they promised to do in one term, which would mean there were no unforeseen circumstances, there were no hiccups, there was nothing that didn't happen perfectly to plan, one would think that that was a wholly unambitious government who set very conservative plans and did so intentionally. But that's what the other side offers, that type of conservatism. And so, Madam President, this is an ambitious government. And anyone who can go to the blueprint tracker and falsify anything, I would welcome it in writing, because how you do serious debate, what you are able to do in writing to engage sensible, serious debate is just what the Bahamian people wish. They have clearly demonstrated that negativity is not sufficient. Madam President, as we move forward, the choices are very clear. We have negativity. We have the conditions of the hospital are bad, dire, all of that. And then you have, by the very same folks, but don't build a new one. So you have,
Point of order.
that's wrong.
What is the chair recognizes Senator Your Honor,
Misleading.
but Ellsworth Johnson
Misleading.
was the nature of your intervention.
What I think the chorus, even by the nursing president, and from this side, is that while you have facilities that are totally inadequate, why should you build the next one before repairing that? The other issue is that the Honorable Senator indicates that what may be coming from this side is negativity. We don't agree with that. That is why you have a loyal opposition to objectively advance issues as they're seen. And from the speech from the throne, we never expect perfection from anybody. As a matter of fact, the presentation by Her Majesty, and I was taken through it, and almost in every, when she begins a sentence, she would say, my government intends to do, my government will, or my government will build on something. Now, the question is whether or not we agree that the government is moving fast enough, if they have done sufficiently to complete the objectives that they say. But that's, to our mind, and for the Bahamian public, it is not negativity, it's what a loyal opposition is expected to do, and that is to critically put our position with regard to the governing party.
Sorry, point of order.
The chair recognizes Senator Honorable Latre Raming.
Point of order, Madam President, just in response to Senator Johnson. Point of order, Madam President, just in response to Senator Johnson on the potential of misleading the House. It was a campaign position of the FNM to oppose a new hospital that was currently being built now. Not on the basis in which that they said that the current one was sufficient, and that they opposed the construction of a new hospital. I think that's what Minister Monroe was saying.
Yeah. Madam.
Thank you, Senator.
We said it was inadequate,
No, man, y'all said that.
and others spoke about it. Our learned friends from the north spoke about it.
I accept.
Well, do you have the document?
I don't mind presenting it afterwards, but I think
No, we are required to lay the
both sides are required.
we're required to lay, House required to lay, just as I spoke to something.
I accept his adoption of the nurses' president's critique, but it was a campaign position of the FNM not to build in the hospital, all right? Because they said. Who's they? The FNM said. The leader of the FNM said, along with the then candidate, which protested outside of the construction of the hospital, said that they were opposed to the building of a new one.
Okay.
In the
All right?
area.
Because Princess Margaret Hospital was adequate. And there was no need for second hospital.
Yeah, come on,
I'm
no,
telling
you're
you, I'm
not
asking you.
saying- the
And they said that, and they said that
the
we should
critique
develop
went further than
Point of
that.
order,
I
Madam.
accept the
Thank you.
critique, you know.
Point of order,
The
Madam.
debating is that y'all are opposed of a second hospital.
You don't
That's what
have-
I'm saying.
You don't, the antenatal standard that the president.
Thank you, Senator. I think Senator,
I'm
Senator
saying y'all opposed to a second hospital. That's what I'm saying.
the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Dr. Trevor Johnson.
Madam President, I rise on a point of order. The member, Senator Raming, is misleading the House. He is correct in stating that it was the campaign position of the Free National Movement against a new hospital. Where he is grossly incorrect is by stating that the Free National Movement and our leaders stated that Princess Margaret Hospital is sufficient. That was never a policy position of the Free National Movement. That PMH was sufficient.
All right.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Trevor Johnson. Doctor.
Yeah, but
Please proceed, Senator.
Madam President, after all of that hubbub, it is still the case that the people who use the facility are voters. People who use the facilities at the hospital, who drive on the roads, who see efforts to do things, all of them spoke. They spoke less than 2 months ago, eh? But, as I say, carry on smartly is what I used to be told. What I used to be told when I still wanted to do
Misleading.
what I wish. What am I
Point of order,
misleading
misleading.
about? The people, the voters don't
They
use
may have
these
spoke,
facilities?
but it does not, that is no
Senator Johnson,
justification.
wait to be recognized. The chair recognizes Senator Ellsworth Johnson.
The people may have spoken, and as Mr. Bruce Golden and the Observer team observed in the Bahamas, that there's some great inadequacies that we must address, and we all agree. But if, despite the fact that the opposite side was successful in an election, in this actual document that we're debating, there's an admission that the facilities are grossly inadequate. And so, insofar, I don't see how you could equate the two between winning an election and the humane observation that people are losing their lives because there's not sufficient medication, staff is leaving, morale is low, the mammogram machine don't work, all those different things. I don't understand how you equate those.
Madam President, I have no difficulty with persons having views. A nurse called me and was complaining that there haven't been elections in the nurses' union and the matter is in court. The nurses' union president would have to address that. So people complain about all manner of things. The point that I made was a very simple one, and that is, in all of the doom and gloom, in all of the complaining, all of this was clear. The Princess Margaret Hospital, I think, was built before I was born, and I consider myself now an old man. I ain't fighting to be young no more. I'm old. I accept that. I have grandchildren. I accept that. And it's older than me. The prison is older than me. A lot of these roads are older than me. A 30, 20-year road. The people saw the work shift from New Providence to the Family Islands with paving. So in Freetown, our roads mightn't have been being paved, but Exuma, where a lot of them were from, their roads were being paved. In Cat Island, the roads were being paved. In Long Island, the roads were being paved. So the voters in New Providence who traveled back and forward have sufficient sense to know that you can't do everything at once. That's the simple point. And so when one talks about completing 80%, you can focus on the 20%, tell the cows come home, but the 80% is clear. Madam President, I just want to deal quickly with two other matters, and then I will ask that the resolution be adopted. Madam President, we have an issue where one talks about labor, and we're going to get to that because we propose a new Employment Act. And my good friend Obie Ferguson Casey used to tell me when I went with him on the labor cases that the best day for labor under the FNM is still worse than the worst day for labor under the PLP. So as good as you get it under the FNM, the best you get it, the worse it could be. And you know, Madam President, the laughable thing about the proposition about the failure to observe these collective bargaining agreements is people may say that, but the job of a labor leader is to file a dispute, a general dispute, if an agreement isn't been honored. Now the real mark of it, and I want the Bahamian people to hear this, is not some reporter writing a story, isn't a union leader saying something, because that's how they negotiate. I tell my colleagues all the time, I was always on the side of the labor union. I was always representing them. Whenever they stop complaining, there's no reason for them to exist. So you would expect them to complain all the time, loudly and frequently, because whenever a labor union stops complaining, there's no reason for them to be. So the mark of whether or not we live up to 60+ industrial agreements is to see how many general disputes are filed with the Department of Labor. As far as I am aware, there are precious few that relates to the obligation under the collective bargaining agreement. See, this ain't just writing stories. There's serious business. So if you are saying that, then you do it. You see what has happened. And yes, Belinda Wilson, who I've represented, she is a vociferous leader. She got to be. And she is saying things are tough. And she's on a second agreement. And in every one, her members get an increase. And I was going to say who didn't get an increase, but I forget we can't talk about that. But they're on their second increase. Just like that. And they've had a number of agreements where they're done. And the readjustment of the salary scales, Madam President, also applies to them.
Point of order.
Chair recognizes Senator Honorable Ellsworth.
To raise the issue of the teachers and the increase is concerning to me for the level of sacrifice that they give in the evening, in the morning with our children, right? And good industrial relations do not sometimes, and not that the Honorable Senator suggested it, do not wait for industrial agreements to be filed. If you could intervene and prevent the filing, you do that. But to speak to the teachers who give great sacrifice to this country and saying that, well, they got an increase. The question is, the increase is always behind time and it's never sufficient.
The chair recognizes Senator Honorable Keenan Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. And point of order, I think the honorable member is misleading the public as it relates to this whole idea of industrial agreements. He is very aware of the fact that both parties come to the table and they discuss what is necessary and then they come to an agreement. No one is saying that the teachers do not work hard, because certainly they do. And what is being inferred is that they're not getting what they've negotiated, and that is not the case. So both parties have come to the table. Both parties have agreed to a position, and to the minister's point, they are on their second round of negotiations, of which they have agreed to negotiation. We are not getting into the debate of whether they deserve more or not. We can never fully pay the teachers for what they do. That's why we call it a calling and not a career. And certainly I would not stand here and say that they are getting what they certainly deserve. But certainly the government has done its part in ensuring that they have come to the table in good faith to give them what they've been agreed.
Thank you, Senator Honorable Keenan
Just
Johnson.
for the point of clarity, so is
Chair-
the honorable,
Chair
through you,
recognizes-
the honorable senator is saying that there's no industrial disputes between the union or issues outstanding? There's no issues outstanding. They've already gotten what they've agreed? That's what you're saying? The union that's headed by Ms. Belinda Wilson?
Chair recognizes Senator Keenan Johnson.
I think what all of us are saying is
No,
that
I'm
let me finish. We are on our second round of negotiations with the Bahamas Union of Teachers. That in and of itself speaks to the fact that there was one agreed position initially. We are now, and again, I'm not going to say that anything has been 100% agreed in this final set of negotiations, because that is not the case. But even the Bahamas Union of Teachers president herself indicated that we are 90+% complete. We are still in the last round of those negotiations for this current industrial agreement. But the fact that we are on our second round of industrial agreements infers in and of itself that there was a previous agreement between parties, which means that both parties came to the table and there was an agreement. And we are now in the process of finalizing another agreement. And I'm not going to speak to that because, yes, that's still in the process, and I'm not going to say that everything is agreed, because that's not the case.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. Senator Monroe, could you please?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. You see, this sort of, I put it this way, in 5 years, because, well, it's not quite 5 years, because September would make 5 years. In 5 years, in less than 5 years of government, one union has 2 agreements. Its members, well, about to have 2 agreements. Some already have their second agreement. The members of that union would remember quite well, for the previous years and in the previous manifestations of our opponents, they get none. There was one union, there was a union who tried to force negotiations, and the government sued them. So all persons see these things, they remember these things. And I heard the litany of labor-friendly accomplishment by the FNM, but I do not think with respect that persons, when they're being made redundant or terminated, appreciated the change that was made in the Employment Act 2001 that changed the assessment of what you are paid when they're firing you from including your tips, where a lot of people, the majority of their salaries are tips. What it does now is it says you're paid your basic wage, which is just your salary. So for all you people in the hospitality industry, if you make $300 as your wage, and you make $500 as tips, $800 as tips, when you get fired under the Fair Labor Standards Act, the tips would have been considered. Under the Employment Act passed by the FNM, you get paid based on the $300 only. When you're made redundant, you get paid on the $300 only. And so when we now consult on the Employment Act, which is coming, I would expect that all of the egregious positions in the Employment Act 2001 that I've been privileged to hear articulated by O.B. Ferguson, Casey, and the other labor unions as labor leaders as I work with them, that we will be looking at addressing those. Yes. And it's a tripartite approach. So the employers will be there. And so, Madam President, talk is just something. When you are at it, you know when you see progress. You know when you see work. So we don't have to talk about 60. All you need to do is be in a union where this is the first agreement you had in a long time. And then you know who did it. And then you know what it looks like. And Madam President, moving quickly to conclusion, national security. We heard about immigration and drugs. It is startling that before the administration changed, there were no significant drug trafficking interdictions in the Bahamas of large quantity of cocaine, notwithstanding that it was accepted that the trafficking of cocaine from Colombia to the United States never stopped. After 2021, there were a number of interdictions of shipments of cocaine, some aided by law enforcement officers and others. The record of securing our borders by this administration speaks for itself. You go from none to plenty. You go from no law enforcement officers being caught up in it to quite a few being caught and put before the court. You have to assess who is serious about securing our borders.
Point of order. As Mike Leonard, as
The chair recognizes Senator Honorable Ellsworth
as
Johnson.
the Honorable Senator knows, the Royal Bahamas Police Force is a constitutionally independent and autonomous body.
Oh, yeah.
And so law enforcement inures to that organization with its chief executive officer being the Commissioner of Police.
Okay.
We've just recently had a change of commissioners of police. So in terms, and when they enforce the law, that applies to all of us. Mm-hmm. And so to the extent that that organization was supplied with the resources that it needed, did not at that time, and I will check the record to see, because I'm certain that there would have been some interdiction.
Major
but
cocaine.
Major
cocaine.
well, there would have been some interdiction, and that there were investigations ongoing, because it's continuous. But the Progressive Liberal Party is not responsible for the efficacy of the Royal Bahamas Police Force. That's what they do. And they're continuous throughout governments. And so to the extent that they did not have one, as long as they get their budget and resupply it, they didn't have one. But I'm not accepting that there was no investigation, that the work by the Drug Enforcement Unit or the police force was not adequate. What we know is that the Honorable Minister has indicated that there were issues of trust, and that our neighbors to the north made certain observation, and there's been some interdictions recently.
Madam President, I never suggested that any part of the police force stop working. I never indicated, because I've been on record as saying that when I was minister, which was over the period, I stay out of police business. All we do is we give them the resources. So when our predecessors did not recruit replacement officers to keep manpower up, we did. When our predecessors permitted a case to
Point of order.
exist.
That misleading.
recognize-
Misleading. I could bring the
Senator, you gotta wait
information.
for
Yes,
the
I
chair
could
to
bring the
recognize you.
information. That squads of police officers went into the defense force and to the police force during the FNM administration. So to say that we did not recruit manpower is totally misleading.
Again, I didn't say they didn't recruit anybody. But if you lose 200 officers a year and you recruit 50 or 100, you're going to have attrition. And the fact of the matter is, Madam President, the number of Defense Force Marines recruited, for instance, I think they put it at 700. The full strength of the Defense Force currently is 2,500. So take the lifespan of a Defense Force Marine, and it's quite evident. If you don't want to say that, then for someone in Andros to call a police station and they're told, we'll come, but you have to pick us up because we don't have no car. When you have the Royal Bahamas Defense Force with its fleet not operationally at sea, no fast intercept boats when that is the profile of trafficking. They might say that we just appoint more competent heads of these agencies than they do. I don't say that at all. When I took the chair, I saw what was the state of the manpower, what was the state of the materials available to them, and what was the state of equipment. So when we took office, we had to buy 100 patrol vehicles right off the top. So, Madam President, it's just a simple thing. You know, you can't really go back on it. And so, Madam President, at the end of the day, there was something that I was taught when I used to appear as a young lawyer. You know, you come late to court, and you stand up and you say, oh, I was caught up in traffic. That's a good excuse, right? Until the judge says, but I came through that same traffic as you did and I was on time. Well, we had the same challenges that they did, because they had nothing until 2019 that they could pray in aid as handicapping them, and you could look at it. But the bottom line to it, Madam President, is simply this. The record speaks about securing our borders. The speech from the throne says that we are going to go further and do more, up the fleet more. We're responsible for Sandy Bottom, the major part of the fleet, and we're going to increase it again. That is what it says. And finally, Madam Speaker, Madam President, immigration is very interesting, you know. There's a suggestion the matter should be sent back for the department. Well, I don't know how they came when Senator Ellsworth Johnson was there, but what comes to us now, when you put the Citizenship Commission in, is we do not recommend that you give this person citizenship. We recommend that you give them permanent residence. And as I said last time, the only thing that amendment is there to cure is, okay, you have the recommendation, but why should this person get permanent residence and they haven't paid the price for it? That's the only difference. So I don't understand what the back and forth is. The one thing that is clear from the speech from the throne is that we are upping, in terms of resources, the resources to the Department of Immigration to do a more effective job of filtering. And again, You've had false documents for a while. The one thing that people have to be clear on is when you start catching people, that doesn't mean it just started. That means you've just started catching them. And they will continue to be caught because the speech from the throne promises that we will not let up. And the speech from the throne promises that we will change the law to say, you accommodating this as a public servant, you will pay. Now, Madam President, before I put the question, and in case I run out of time, I would just ask you to indulge me. We will, no more than 3 minutes, we will be adjourning sine die today. I've already warned the chamber that we may be called back before the House is to address some matters. That's a matter that I'm taking under advisement from the persons who look at that. But the one thing I want to encourage all senators, all members of the public to do is my office is concerned in the legal drafting area with drafting the bills that will come before the House and this place, the Senate and the other place. We will encourage persons, Madam President, that a part of the job of a member of Parliament, part of a job of a senator, is not simply to come here and talk about bills, but to doing the consultative process, to have a look at the bills, to send your comments, your suggestions. They will be taken seriously. In the last administration, Madam President, I think everyone would have seen, we made amendments when they were in the House, in that other place, because we take consultation seriously. So I just want to encourage all of us that a part of this job, a part of a job of a senator is not just to come here and speak, but early on in the formative stage of legislation to participate. And that's a part of the job as well. And with that, Madam President, I would ask that the Senate to adopt the resolution, if I may, the resolution that a humble address be presented to Her Excellency, the Governor General, thanking her for a most gracious speech on the opening of Parliament.
The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Orinthia Kumalafe.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Just wanted to respond to a point by the senator on a point of clarification as it relates to the matter of labor and the F&M and the assertion that the Bahamian people were not pleased with those provisions. I want to remind the member, Madam President, that legislation was passed in 2001. The PLP has been elected 3 times now, 4 times, but we know this is the beginning of their 4th term since the enactment of that legislation. If they had a challenge with the legislation, they could have repealed it in 2002, in 2012, in 2021. The other point I would like to make, Madam President, is the fact that when that bill was presented to the Parliament in 2001, the Progressive Liberal Party voted for it. All the matters concerning minimum wage, discrimination, severance, redundancy calculations, they were all a part of that bill in 2001, and the Progressive Liberal Party voted for it. And the third point that I would make is, Madam President, if the Bahamian people were not pleased with that bill or pleased with the F&M, as the member suggests, the F&M has been elected twice since the passage of that bill. In 2007, with a near 50% majority or popular vote, and in 2017 with a near 60% popular vote.
Madam President, if you say that a hospitality worker, when they are being fired, prefer to get paid based on $300 per week instead of $800 per week. All of that makes sense. I don't think anyone is satisfied with getting less money. None of the ones that I represent were. So we can go about with machinations, but the substantial point is that the F&M brought in a bill that means that any hotel worker, any worker based on tips, instead of having their tips included when they are fired or made redundant, now did not from 2001 have it, and they were paid on their basic wage, and there was grumbling about it from then. And the point that I make is, you might say that we didn't repeal it. We're not claiming it as goodness and light either. And that's the very simple point of it. This mammoth act that is heralded did something very fundamental for workers on tips. When you are fired, when you are made redundant, and then it did something even worse for construction workers. And the public would be asked to look at exactly when in the term of the F&M that bill became law. But the question has been put, Madam President, and there is there's no debate after the question is put.
The question,
I beg your,
Yeah.
I beg your.
Senator,
Gave you a long explanation.
Senator.
Madam President,
Senator,
the
Senator,
senator
no,
was
no, no.
misleading in his comments. He's seeking
Senator.
to confuse what I have said and to put words in my mouth. I
Thank
stand on my previous intervention,
Senator, the
Madam
question-
President.
Senator.
And we look forward to the debate of the Progressive Liberal Party's bill for 2026. And we will address those matters moving forward.
Thank you, Senator.
Basic pay,
It has been moved and seconded that a humble address be presented to Her Excellency the Governor General, thanking her for a most gracious speech at the opening of Parliament. As many are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion is carried. The resolution is agreed. Discharge of select committees. Notices for future meetings.
There are no.
Orders for clerk. And just before we take the adjournment, the chair wishes to extend sincere condolences to the family of the late Minister Bernice Francis, who was a courageous soldier for Christ. She bore the fruits of the Spirit and was an exemplary Christian woman. And I extend condolences on behalf of the President and on behalf of the wider Senate body, especially to her son, Attorney DeVard Francis, and the rest of her family. I pray that you are comforted by her love and her legacy at this time of bereavement. And it would also be remiss of me, Senate colleagues, if I did not extend happy 205th Independence anniversary to our neighbors in the North, United States of America. And I wish them all the best. I wish them another 250 years and beyond. And may God continue to bless the United States of America. And with that, and I would say happy independence to Bahamians when I see you all at the fort. And when I see you all at the fort, with those of you who I don't get an opportunity to greet at the Fort Charlotte, I'd also like to extend happy independence to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I look forward to seeing all of you all at the ecumenical service next week, Thursday at 8 p.m. Yeah, that is if we don't come back before then.
You won't come back before independence. Just don't go far.
Adjournment.
Madam President, I move that the Senate on its rising do stand adjourned, sine die.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the Senate at its rising do adjourn, sine die. Final adjournment.
I now move that the Senate do stand adjourned, sine die.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the Senate stands adjourned, sine die. As many as in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. The Senate stands adjourned, sine die.